about the way that the US now has first to file, so it will give greater legal certainty about who's entitled to patent. And you can talk about what differences still remain. So I mentioned earlier that US has a grace period, so the inventor can still write about his invention before he files the patent application. And then if there are some advantages and disadvantages, similarities and differences, so maybe one advantage is they're converging, getting closer together. So for the patent applicant who's applying at the EPO and the USPTO, they now have greater legal certainty. The systems are more similar. But maybe if you're proposing changes to the future, something like a grace period for the EPC to allow the inventor to publish before he files a patent application could be an example of how things could improve to overcome the disadvantages of the current system. Okay, so I'll move on to question 2. Comparing the EPC and US patent law, have exceptions and exclusions evolved in both legal systems? Okay. So the exceptions, starting with EPC, you know that there's a list of things which are not considered inventions, so they're not available for patenting, like computer programs. That's the first thing. You have to set out the list of things which are not inventions. You also know that in Article 53 of the EPC that there are things which are inventions but which are excluded from patentability because they're considered immoral inventions. You can set that up. You can also because we haven't studied this is coming in next week's class, but you remember yesterday, in the last slide, I showed you section 101 of the US Patent Code, which says that patents are available for any invention and discovery, whether a machine or manufacture or combination of either. And what I'm going to say at the beginning of next week's class is that basically in the US that means that anything under the sun known to man is available for patenting. The Supreme Court in the US used that terminology. Anything under the sun known to man is available for patenting. So the US has started with a very wide concept of what can be patented. And next week's class I'll show you some of the crazy examples of things which have been patented, including a method claim for pushing a child on a swing in a park, and that patent was granted. A method of pushing a child on a swing. So it was really very wide in the US. But we'll also go through the case law in class next week, and in the United States they started to narrow the what can be patented. In particular, with abstract ideas. So if you just have an abstract idea, or wouldn't it be a good idea to save money by doing this? I'll apply for a patent now. And now, these types of business method patents, the Supreme Court, and also in another amendment of the AIA, they have tried to stop these types of abstract idea patents in the US. So, applying those facts to the question, the critical analysis would be, well, with things like computer programs, the EPC is expanding what can be patented. You now can get a patent on a computer program if you demonstrate some technical effect and it's running on computer hardware. If you write the claims correctly, you can get a patent on computer program. But, you can also now get a patent on a plant variety or animal variety if you don't say the name of the plant or animal, because it's not then not a variety. But you cannot get a patent on an exclusion where an exclusion applies on grounds of morality, like with stem cell research and using human embryos. So your analysis, even within the EPC, is there's some expanding of what can be patented and some narrowing, depending on computer programs, plant varieties on the one hand, or stem cell inventions on the other. And then in the US, they are kind of narrow. They started off by expanding very wide in the 1952 Act, and they're narrowing it now to try and stop these very abstract patents. So then your conclusion, your adopt a prescriptive approach, is how might this change in the future, and how can users of the patent system benefit from knowledge of the different systems. And your conclusions might include things like, well, it's good for legal certainty that computer software companies can now obtain patents at EPC in the same way that they would have used PTO. For stem cell research, maybe the implication of not being able to get patents at the EPO is that this research will move to the US because there's no financial incentive to do this research in Europe. So differences and similarities remain, and how might this evolve and change in the future? So again, I've applied the principles of describe, analyze, propose to the question. So the third topic about infringement and claim construction. So, because this is about the UK law, not directly about the EPC. However, you know that you want to start the essay by saying something about Article 69 of the EPC and the protocol. Because you know that under the old 1949 UK Patents Act, I told you that we used to have a doctrine of equivalence approach, but after the law in the UK was amended with the 1977 Patents Act to bring the UK in conformity with the EPC, the courts then interpreted this in the Catnip case, with the case extending vertically. The court said, okay, so we now have to come up with this new concept, and we'll call it purposeless construction. What's the purpose of the person writing the patent application? How we should understand that. Then we saw the improver case, where they then said, okay, to apply Article 69 in the protocol, we have to ask 3 questions. What would the person skilled have thought when they read the patent document? Then we saw in the Kieran Amgen case that Lord Hoffman said, you don't always need to ask the improver questions because it might be clear to the person skilled what is meant when they read about a DNA sequence, what is outside or inside the DNA, and Hoffman said you can never confuse those 2 things. And then we saw in the Eli Lilly case that the Supreme Court last year said, well, actually what the UK needs to do to be in conformity with Article 2 of the protocol to the EPC is to have a doctrine of equivalence approach, because Article 2 of the protocol talks about the equivalence of variants should also fall within the scope of claims. So in order to implement that, they've gone back to the improver questions and said, well, actually, you need to change the second question to give the person skilled in the art the knowledge that they would have now. And the case was about whether the salt dissolved, and they only knew when they applied for the patent that the disodium salt worked. And now we know that the other salts work as well. And the court has said, well, you give that knowledge that the other salts would work to the person skilled in the art when they read the patent document, and they would have thought that the variant falls within the scope of the claims, having the knowledge that they do now. So you can show that actually what the UK has done is come back to a doctrine of equivalence approach they had actually in 1949. And although we haven't studied it yet, next Thursday we will learn that the US also has a doctrine of equivalence approach from cases like Graver Tank and Festo, which we'll study next week. So this is judge-made law through the courts in the US. So we'll see similarities, doctrine of equivalence, but we will also see